Alright guys, I'm Lark Will, and in this video what I want to do is focus on player death penalties in Ashes of Creation. I've been reading through the wiki and trying to get grips of what the different penalties are and kind of how affect the meta and gameplay when the game launches. And so far all we can go on is what's currently not necessarily in the game, but what we know about the game and what its intent is at this point in development. And of course everything is subject to change, and hopefully, like I'm going to be pointing out in this video, my hope is that some of it does. But I'll kind of walk you through some of the different elements of player death penalties and kind of let you know what, from my experience in different MMOs and different games, that Ashes of Creation might be able to improve upon, what I think will work really well, and what areas there are some opportunity for some tweaking to make sure that griefing and running off players that would otherwise really enjoy the game once it inevitably launches are here to stay and won't actually exit prematurely before fixes could be implemented based upon maybe some penalties that I think are a little severe and overburdening. So, all right, without further ado here, guys, I'm going to be going through player death on green non-combatant players. So again, non-combatants are just PvE players that just exited their town. They just logged in, they're walking out of the city, they haven't engaged in any kind of PvP content so far. That is a non-combatant, and they are not flagged for combat with other players at that time. So currently they have a green player tag. I think they're going to have an icon over their head in game. All right, so when they are killed off either via PvP, PvE, or any kind of natural hazard, drowning, fall damage, fire, any kind of bio kind of thing that could involve in the game, per the wiki, there are no differences in death penalties between PvP and PvE content. It might be subject to change in the future, but right now, whether you drown, whether you fall on a volcano, whether another player kills you right when you log in, you're going to face the same penalties based upon whatever tag you have at the time. Again, between green non-combatant, purple combatant, or red player corrupt. So for this first part, I'll talk about the green combatant, or I'm sorry, non-combatant, who dies and suffers normal penalties, which include, quote unquote, from the wiki, experience debt. Again, a negative experience. So it's not going to unwind the player's level cap, as far as we know. It's just going to be, at least for non-combatant players, it's just going to be an experience debt that they have to work off. And then the following other penalties are also included when a non-combatant green player dies. And that would be skill and stat dampening, lower health and mana, lower gear proficiency, reduction in drop rates from monsters, and durability loss. So the intention from the wiki is that there's going to be a time sink, a gold sink, and a resource or material sink, even for non-combatant players when they die. Again, whether that's drowning, whether it's PvP, whether they die to a raid boss, etc. Anytime there's a death or your character dies and you're non-combatant, you will suffer those penalties. In the wiki currently, they're saying the experience debt will scale to approximately 2 or 3% of the total experience for a max level player. So early on levels, guys, when you're like level 3, 2 or 3% might only be 1 or 2 more mobs, that are very fast to kill. It's just a blink of an eye. You probably don't even, it won't be impactful. But once you're reaching max level, we know it gets pretty grindy, and that will be more of a significant time burden when you do die, for whatever reason it might happen. And that'll be more of a source and impactful feeling that you've lost progress and it's going to set you back. Again, from a time standpoint, your character is going to have to respawn somewhere, so you're going to have to go back to wherever you were, regroup, etc. There's going to be a material cost to actually repairing all your items, because again, when you die, there's a durability loss. It is not yet listed in the wiki what that durability loss will be, percentage-wise. Whether it's 5%, 10%, 20%, it's unknown, at least through the wiki right now. And I hope actually the 2 or 3% does not sound that dramatic. So hopefully in their testing, that stays where it's at. I actually don't think that's too much of a burden from an experience standpoint. I'm not too upset with that at all. I think that's okay. I prefer it not to exist at all for non-combatants personally. I don't think it's going to help PvE primary players want to not necessarily coexist, but want to actually participate in PvP hunting zones, as they call it, or zones where it's not consensual PvP. So those situations, guys, personally, I think the non-combatant preferably would not face this kind of probation set of dampening and death penalties when they die. And let's just say, on average, and I think this is actually going to be pretty optimistic, but if a rival party, group, or individual attacks you and they're flagged or they want to kill you, more often than not, they're going to kill you. And it's not going to be 100%, but if they have that intent, unless they're just really low leveled, usually they're going to get the drop on you. Their mindset is aimed at that. It's premeditated. You're going about your day. You're thinking about your crafting. You're looking at your map. There's all sorts of scenarios to where you're going to be at a disadvantage. You might be talking in Discord. You're trying to set up comms and some kind of voice chat, and somebody attacks you. So for me personally, with all the other distraction things we have going on, I'm not an advocate for non-combatant green player, experience dead, skill and stat dampening, lower health and mana, lower gear proficiency, reduction in drop rates from monsters, and durability loss. I think that is a wealth of penalties that you're throttling somebody with that is really going to be negatively impacting their experience in going back out and braving the world. I think you want players to be motivated to do PvP content from a positive standpoint, not from a negative standpoint where you do this or else. Your penalties are going to be really severe. And I think that'll make people scared away from engaging in PvP content in the open world. It won't actually drive in a dynamic PvP environment where they actually want to participate when they're faced with the very real possibilities of having their character progress stifled in a meaningful way until they work off that debt and get rid of the dampening and all the negative effects. So again, only 2 or 3%, guys, but say you do that once and then you go back out and for whatever reason you die again, whether it's fall damage or somebody kills you again. Now it's starting to tick up, and 6%, 4 to 6% might be more meaningful. And if you're actually in a raid, guys, one thing I would say for non-combatant players is when you're in a raid environment, and I'm talking generally, guys, not from my perspective, but just what goes on in the MMO space. If you're in an endgame MMO, raiding clan or group or alliance, and you're all in a group Discord, you go out there and say this other group comes on and pushes you out, kills some of your members, or wipes your full team. You're pretty much done at that point. You can't go back out there and do that hard dungeon raid boss, world boss event, because now all of your dampening, your reduction in drop rates, your gear proficiency have been lowered. Your durability of your gears, your experience, so you're not even gaining experience. It's just going off as a debt. So there's a lot of problems with that. Reduction in health and mana. So what I'm getting at, guys, is one of my questions and I think the challenges they're going to have with this, and I've seen from other games, specifically Albion Online, is when you have a PvE content, whether it's a raid, whether it's a world boss, what have you. Let's exclude the world boss for now, because I think that's more of a legendary, global kind of content, and I think that's more of an exception. But just you're going into a dungeon and you're setting up camp at like a common spawn area where it's good experience in a raid, and you're going to try to bring your team in there and either defeat a boss for like an achievement or for first time rewards or quest, or just for the experience. So you have a group of 5 to 8 players. I think they're set to 8 player content for a lot of it. So say you have 8 to 10 players for that, and you're all there, and you're doing that activity. One of the challenges I've seen, especially in Albion Online, is when you're doing these group content PvE dungeons, adversarial in the sense that it's a competitive and difficult level. So you don't want them to be just one-shotting everything and the whole group to be wiping everything out and to go by and not be memorable, because at that point it's not making an impact and it doesn't feel like it's difficult for the PvE content type players. So they're not going to enjoy it as much because it doesn't feel like a challenge to them. So one challenge I see is, okay, if you scale all of the PvE content to be adequate and a very high bar challenge to the PvE players, one of the difficulties with that is that those players now have to contend with PP players to come behind them and either try to attack them, flag on them, kill their healer, kill their DPS, run them off the mobs. And there's multiple challenges with that. Is A, your tank and your whole player team is aimed at the PvE content boss fight, and usually you're getting attacked in the back, so you don't so unless like a lot of the meta might be trying to reposition so you can see where the entranceways are, so you see opposing players come at you, and then you have your back towards an exit that they're not coming from, or else you can at least have sight of them and try to disengage somehow and reset your cooldowns and get prepared for a fight or duel with the other group or the single player who's trying to attack you. So that's one challenge, is usually you have your back, you're coming through the entrance of where all the players are coming. So your back is normally, and your camera is normally turned away from where the PvP players are coming. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is, like I mentioned, you normally have cooldowns. So if you're stuck on a boss and it's a very difficult boss and you're doing a PvE content, usually your cooldowns are down unless this game has really low cooldown settings, and then it's like rapid fire, and then it's not going to be as impactful. But a lot of games have 10, 15 second, 30 second cooldowns on a lot of major abilities, and if another group comes behind you, they see you use one of those key major abilities, you're left defenseless in a certain sense, because your major heal might be down, your major taunt or DPS ability might be down. You're usually flanked, your cooldowns are down, your tank's not going to be in position to protect the healers and the DPS because they're all in the main boss fight or the other mobs. So you're just in a really defenseless position. And the challenge is, how do you make the PvE content difficult and challenging while also not making it a full guaranteed wipe for the PvE players that are engaged with that anytime another rival group wants to contest them? So some different ideas that I have that would make that better for the non-combatants, specifically in PvE type raid environments. There's other things for Outworld that I'll talk about when they're just traveling and venturing around the map. But for specifically when you're there engaged, one group is engaged on PvE content mobs, what I would suggest is for the mobs to or for the party to have a disengage ability. And this is something that Albion did not have, and a lot of the mobs would chase you a very long ways. They had a very, very long leash ranges, and it was problematic because both they were very challenging for the group parties that you were doing. So it was like all hands on deck, you needed all of your effort to clear them. And then B, they would chase you 3 rooms away trying to kill you, and they were almost as fast as you were. And they did a lot of high damage if you were on a boss. So the leash ranges were very, very long. And so far from the alpha, what I've been seeing in Ashes of Creation is some similar thing to a certain extent. The leash ranges are very long. What I haven't seen is that the mobs are able to attack you very easily when you're on the run. It seems like they're chasing you, but I haven't seen Steven or the other characters from the footage been attacked. So as long as the mobs aren't running behind you and able to attack you very easily, that's going to help. But also, if you get stopped by the other group and they pin you between that boss mob or the trash mobs or the bigger mobs and the other party that's trying to attack you, you're sandwiched in between the mobs or the boss and that other party to get out. So again, you're flanked and you're walled off and you're taking damage from both sides, and it becomes very difficult, especially if it's on a boss, because the boss is going to be launching AoEs and other large CC abilities and high damage skills against you. And again, it just puts all the disadvantages are on that PvE group. So what I would suggest to help mitigate this without having to overhaul the system is to give a class like a bard or a tank not a global, but any mobs that they're engaged with that they have aggro on, is to have a reset ability. So they have something on their hotbar. Okay, we have a PvP group coming up. They're twice as large as we are. They have 10 or 15 players. We have 8. We got to bounce. We got to get out of here. We're in a bad spot. And it looks like they're making a dead sprint at us. We got to bail. So they're groups that are on PvE content need ability to do a reset. Lose the boss or the mob aggro, and then make an exit strategy somehow. So at least some of their party can get away, if not all of them, and try to make at least a defense. Because if they're having to fight off the boss and the other group, especially if it's a larger party, you're just in a lose-lose situation. I mean, unless you have a flying mount and can can get out really fast. It's not a good situation to be in, and almost all of the advantages are with the PvP group. And you don't want to alienate PvE players to where they don't have a way to defend themselves. So what I would suggest is mechanisms to where the PvE players can at least disentangle themselves from the mobs and then put up some kind of a fight or a defense to where it's just not a clean wipe. Because what I've seen in Albion is usually one guy with a spinning axe or a dagger will come behind, and a group of 5 or 6 players will be locked on a boss fight. It's very difficult for them, and literally one player or 2 players will come behind and wipe out the whole party because the boss is just raining fire on them, and then one player comes from behind and will just grief them and wipe out the full party. It's full loot over there, so there's reasons why that happens a lot more in that environment. But again, anytime you have very difficult, non-instanced PvE content, there's always going to be that element of griefing, and especially if there's this host of basically penalties that the PvE players or green players, the non-combatants, have to work off. One player is going to grief them just because they can, just to make a highlight video, just to say, hey, one person in your party may have beat their guild in some kind of other content, and now they're just going to make your life hell just because they can. And to a large extent of this, guys, a lot of people will do these kind of things just because they can. So one of the challenges I think Ash is going to have, at least for the PvE and PvP content, is how do you mix it to where both have a place in the game. And I'm not talking, I know a lot of players are saying, hey, single player role players that are just one person, you got to group up. But there's always bigger groups, and again, even if you are in a group, that doesn't protect you versus other PvP players. So again, if the bosses or the mobs in these dungeons are geared up to be a very difficult challenge for PvP for players in general in groups, any player that comes behind them can wipe them out very easily just by putting that little bit of extra added pressure on them. So whether you're carrying a lot of consumables, whether or not they just want your spot, it puts them in a really disadvantaged position, and you guys get it. And that's one of my concerns with non-instanced dungeon and PvE content for raids, guys. As I've seen in Albion, anyone can enter the dungeon that you're in. If you're a PvE player, they come behind you and they'll wipe you out, and basically you just waste a lot of time, and it's frustrating. You also lose all your gear, so it's even more frustrating there. Any of the drops, you lose those as well as full loot, and that's not in Ashes of Creation. But one of the challenges I see is with just all of those penalties. I think there's enough penalties built in just in the fact that you are wiped. So you have the FOMO, fear of missing out. So all of your experience gain that you would have got if you weren't wiped at that spot, say you get to a nice position to farm experience or to do a dungeon boss fight. Anytime you're wiped or you're down there and you can't revive and you have to respawn elsewhere and run a long distance to get back to where that camp or mob is, or that dungeon, there's already a penalty with that. You're already wasting 30 minutes of hassle try to get back there, 15 minutes. So there's probably going to be some kind of time element just to get back to where you were, much less even decide if you want to go fight off the other group to reclaim your spot. And so there's some challenges with that, and so that's already enough of a penalty of just the time. You're already going to have durability loss anytime you die in the game. I think most MMOs have that, so that's pretty normal, and there's no problems with that. Especially because that element I'm actually okay with, because it reemphasizes the crafting system and gathering of having to continue to gather materials to repair items. It makes sense. That's a full barrage of rain of just crapping on players that it feels very unnecessary. And I know they've talked about risk and reward in the game, but in this instance, for death penalties, it feels overly burdensome. And I think that host of the main kind of gamut of dampenings and penalties should be held specifically to corrupt players in my mind. I don't think you need those on green non-combatants. And actually, I think, if anything, it'll disincentivize those players from even ever wanting to mess with PvP. Wow. I see so many players are going to be alienated from that, and you're really going to be pushing away a lot of player base with very severe penalties for braving the world. And I think you want to encourage people to do that. But then I beat that horse, and you guys get it. But my main things, guys, if I'm going to boil this down, is the penalties of experience debt, skill and stat dampening, lower health and mana, lower gear proficiency, reduction in drop rates from monsters, and durability loss. It's overly done. It's just a cascade of penalties that are overly burdensome and aren't going to incentivize players to engage in the game with other players. You don't want to create a lot of hermits just because there's so many penalties. Hey, you walk outside your house, there's a thunderbolt on your head. Hey, you risk the world, and there's your penalty. You know, like risk versus reward. Hey, you walked outside, thunderbolt to the head. I don't think you want to have it set up like that. And I know the corruption system, there's penalties for the corrupt and players that do those things. But again, I don't think we need to have penalties on the person that walks outside their house. If their parent, their family member wants to talk to them and they're outside the castle and they're just standing in the middle of the road, I don't think you need to penalize them with a whole host of 3% stat dampening and all these other penalties just because they got distracted. My dogs are next to me right now. They want attention, they want to play with me. If I take my eyes off my computer and somebody walks up and hits me over the head with something and I die, okay, I have to respawn, I have to repair my gear. That should be penalty enough. Like I don't need to waste an hour of my time killing mobs and doing skill and stat dampening and all these other penalties just because I got distracted for 15 seconds. I think there's going to be so many scenarios where that is just so overly problematic with an IRL. Just life distractions. I think in the game, if you want like a super high intensity game where it's always that risk and reward, and you can never take a moment break, I get what they're going for there, but just in real life, guys, we get distracted. I might be talking on Discord. You might turn away for in real life stuff. If you're a guild leader, you're going to be setting up stuff. You're not always going to be in a group of 15 players to protect you. Let's just be real. You're going to very, very often in every MMO, if you look at any streamer, anyone that ever plays an MMO, there are tons of downtime hours where a player is by themselves or with one other person, and they're kind of just idle, AFK out of town or AFK outside of town, looking at a map. If you have it set up so penalizing, anytime you pull up your map in this game, you could get killed and you're not even looking, and all of a sudden you're dead. I think that is going to be. I have no problem with dying. I have no problem with losing some money, materials, and time on repairing my gear. But if you're resetting the character and putting them in all sorts of stat penalties and wasting an hour of their time, especially if it's a redundant thing, I think it's going to be a problem for the game. And I don't see what it's reinforcing or what it's encouraging. I actually see that just as a detriment towards being an active player. And this is coming from Albion, in my experience there. A lot of players, when they feel like they're being griefed redundantly, whether it's being camping or you guys all know the deal there. A lot of players just log off, and if there's a bunch of enemies roaming outside the castle, they can't go travel to wherever they want to go to do the dungeon, to go to another city, do anything, or just adventure, or go to the freehold. And you're stuck in the node because there's a roaming band of killers outside. They're all corrupted and want your head. Your only option is, okay, do whatever you can for content inside that node, or log off and come back later and hope they're gone. And I don't think that's something that they want to reinforce. At least not. I mean, it's fine if there's like a war going on and that's the case. There for the 24-hour, 6-hour period. That's perfectly fine. I think that's exciting. It's good for the game to a large regard. But if that's just the everyday occurrence of people walking outside and they're looking at their mini map and somebody walks up and can just do so much harm to your account from a progress standpoint, I think that's just going to be griefing just to grief. And people will grief and kill players they can just because they think it's funny, just because they know it's going to troll you and reset your progress. And in a large regard, I think my main driving point that I'm not hitting, guys, is that group of penalties for non-combatants are so significant that players that want to grief you will do so just because they know it's going to set you back. If there was no penalty to the player that dies and it wasn't a big deal, people wouldn't do it. But a lot of players are going to kill you while you're picking flowers, like I've heard people say, just because they know it is going to harm your account. It's going to set you back. You are going to be inconvenienced with it. They're going to cost you gold, time, materials, and all those stat dampening effects. And they're not going to be so concerned with how it affects their account. They're just going to do it because they know it hurts you. And people are like that. So I think a way to not necessarily, I don't necessarily want PvP and players not to be able to partake in that. I think that's fine. I just don't. I think they're having enough fun by killing you and laughing about it on their end, without all the negative stats and dampening effects that would trigger on a non-combatant. I don't think those are needed. The players that want to grief and want to kill other players and want to PvP for whatever their reasons are, they're going to do it anyways. I'm going to do it sometimes. I'm sure I will too. But they don't. I don't need to be incentivized because I'm going to make you suffer your account. Hey, I'm going to, every time I see you, I'm going to make you suffer so you quit the game. And I think all different elements of that they can remove from the game as much as possible are very helpful, and I think would be wise to do. Because if players feel like, hey, I'm making negative progress for the time I'm logged on, I'm off work or I have free time on a Saturday, I want to log into the game, I don't think it's healthy for players to feel like, man, I'm making negative progress. I'm actually going backwards in my account. I logged on, I'm trying to go to my freehold, and man, a roving band of 5 people just ran up and killed me for my mule. They're just by the off chance I might have something in that mule. And I was just role playing with my donkey. I don't know. I wouldn't do that, but I'm sure some players will. Like some players will just be, well, let me put it this way, guys. Fishing is a popular activity. I was thinking about this earlier. Fishing is a popular activity in every MMO. Do we want to have just because they can? Hey, I've seen that fisherman sitting there for an hour. I'm just going to walk up behind him. Hey, he looks like he's AFK. He's not throwing his lure out for like the last 30 seconds. I'm just going to go kill him and steal his fish because he doesn't even have a weapon attached. He's just got a fishing pole. I mean, do we really want that to happen like consistently? That's going to happen. I guarantee you, fishermen are going to be killed all over Vera just because they can be. And I don't know. I feel like a lot of play styles. I actually don't even like fishing. I think it's tedious. In every game I play, I've always found it tedious. I don't like fishing. But there's a lot of people that love fishing. There's a lot of people that just like running around and exploring. I don't think we want to incentivize players to kill other players that are exploring the world, and just by the off chance they have gatherables on them, and they're in a remote area where other players, it's not abundant where they are, and they can probably work off the corruption before anyone else can get to them. I don't think that's a positive thing that should be going on as a mainstay staple of most servers. So I'm against it. I prefer if they removed all of the negative effects for non-combatant players when they die, except for the durability loss. If they want to have like a 1% experience stat, personally I hate it. I think they should get rid of that crap too. If they want to do like a reduction in drop rates for like 2% experience, I don't have a major problem with that, because it's kind of a negligible thing, and it's a chance thing anyways. But the durability loss is fine, but the lower gear proficiency, lower health and mana, skill and stat dampening, and the experience stat, I'm not a fan of that. I think most players, guys, are not going to be geared up like I am coming from a full loop PvP games. Most players are not mentally prepared for the amount of griefing and the amount of frustration they're going to have, even when another player is not involved. Say somebody's walking along a cliff and they fall down, or they drown because they don't know how fast they're swimming, and they're going down underwater for something, they come back up and they drown. You don't want to be resetting your progress that much, and that's going to be frustrating. I don't think that's going to be something long-term that will be healthy. Hopefully it's changed. All right, enough on that. The next thing, a combatant, purple player, who dies suffers the same penalties, but at half the rate of a non-combatant. So half the rate of a non-combatant green player. So if the green player, I believe, is going to face 100% of the penalty, a combatant player who fights back, a purple player is going to suffer when they die half the rate of a non-combatant. What I'm kind of concerned with is, like, say if you're a PvEer, how do you combat because you can't attack other players that are in your guild or your group. You can't flag rush them. So say like there's this other boss, hey, we're going down, I can't escape, he's on my butt, I'm slowed and CC'd. You'd almost want to like flag on your teammates and just fire the last shot at each other. That way you face less penalty. But you can't do that. So you're just going to face 100% of the penalty just because you're a non-combatant doing PvE content. I'm not a fan of this. I know they want to emphasize players to fight back and participate in PvP environments, guys. But I can tell you from coming from a full loop PvP game, players that just want to do PvE content, it's like a mental compartmentalization where they just want to do economic activities. They just want to do crafting, gathering, or artisan activities, as Ashes calls it. They just want to role play. They have a boyfriend or girlfriend. They just want to go hang out with them, and run around the map. They're not interested in engaging with other players. And I don't think all elements of the game should penalize those players. Or there's enough PvP in the game where like all of the free time activities should just be free time in my mind. I don't think you have to. Again, if somebody wants to walk up and just kill off the couple and make them respawn at city, and have some frustration and time loss there, okay, that's part of the game. Perfectly fine, no problem. But like, why are you doing all those other band of penalties on them? It just seems like overly trolling and griefing. I don't know why that's there. If you want players to participate in PvP environments, give them positive incentives, not the whip. So like if you're training dogs, I have 2 dogs, guys. You don't want to negatively incentivize your pets almost for anything. Like it's almost everything, like kids, whether it's your pets, almost everything has to be positive motivation. Like any dog trainer will tell you this. If you want to train pets, you use positive reinforcement. And I think the same thing is true here. And I think what they're trying to go for is like a positive reinforcement, okay, from a sense that a combatant player has less penalties. But it's still just, if you look at it the opposite way, it's just one has less penalties than the other. So it's still negative reinforcement. So the non-combatant player is negatively reinforced, and then the combatant player is negative reinforced half as much. So it's not a positive. It's just they're both negatives. You're dying and you're gonna suffer this group of penalties. I don't players that are open to that, to go out and try to engage with corrupt players to try to get the loot. That's enough positive encouragement. They want to go flag up as a bounty hunter. That's positive encouragement. They can get some loot drops. It's fun. It's exciting. That's enough. Like players like myself that like PvP, we're going to do it just because we like it. And the chance of exciting gameplay, content, quote unquote, the chance to get a gear drop from them, the chance for justice and to be the white knight and all that stuff. That's enough motivations. We don't need a whole lot else. But the players that are trying not to die, don't want to participate, just want to go hang out with their friends, family, spouse, what have you. They're distracted. They're looking at their mini map. The 100 other, reasons why they don't want to. They don't either want to. They're not ready. It's just not the mind space that they're in to participate in PvP content. I don't know what the reason is for all those penalties. If somebody wants to walk up and hit them over the head with a club and take a percentage of their drops from consumables and gatherables and whatnot, fine, so be it. But all those other systems and of dampenings are not going to incentivize them to fight back. They're just not into it, guys. And I don't think it's healthy to like not give them in the space in this game when it launches to participate in all the activities. There's so many different elements of PvP, like not forced content, but they're major systems of asset creation that are going to be amazing. Guild wars, node sieges, castle sieges, caravans, naval content, world bosses where like everyone, there's going to be hundreds of people going to these world bosses and massive guild fights just over the rights to kill the boss or trying to get the last hit. There's going to be so much PvP in this game, all over the place. I think what they should do is try to minimize how much frustration and how much PvP players have to do outside of those systems. There's so much PvP content. Don't make people feel penalized for doing the free time activities. And that's my main thought process on that, guys, is if somebody wants to kill somebody that's taking their mule along and take their gatherables, so be it. But don't continue to penalize crafters, gatherers, people that want to just do free time activities. Let them run around the world. Let them populate the world. Let the world feel vibrant and exciting and engaging and alive. Don't make it feel empty and penalizing and run everyone away from the game or have them log off because, man, unless it's going to be a primetime PvP environment, this game's not worth playing because every time I run out, people's griefing me everywhere I go. And I've heard that they're actually, that's just a scenario. It's not a reality. I've heard them talk about it and saying that a lot of spaces, it's not going to be the case because the corruption system will negatively incentivize players from doing that. I will tell you, there are major guilds forming right now in the background, and their sole intent and mission statement is to kill everyone they can and take their stuff. That is their modus operandi. If you look at their guild banners. I come from Ashes. There are a lot of players that love pirating, and you're putting pirating in this game with those little pirate coves and these nodes on the water. They look amazing. They look like an absolute blast. I'm going to engage in with them. I think it's going to be really fun content. But man, oh man, the average player that isn't all about that life, I'm telling you, they're going to have a rude awakening with this system unless it's changed. Not only are they going to be killed, but their account's going to get rolled back in meaningful ways. And if it happens a few times in a row, you can guarantee those players in the course of an hour, if they die 3 times, will be logging off from the game, will be throwing the keyboard, the remote, the mouse. They'll be cursing the game for a certain extent. So I would encourage a walk back on these penalties. You want people to go back out and fight again, guys, and that's the main thing. Like, and now beyond there's hundreds of MMOs and fighting games. That's just the one I'm really experienced with from a massively ZVZ, GVG type game. You die, you lose your stuff, you go back out, you equip another set of gear, and you run back out there and you join the fray again. It's a lot of fun. Hey, I died in a 100 versus 100 fight. I lasted 30 minutes. They finally got me. Okay, I spawned at the city. I put on a backup set of gear. Like in a lot of games like that, you just have like 10 sets ready. You just equip another set and you run back out and you rejoin the fight. And then that time you might even flag as the opposing team than you did to begin with, and you join the opposite side and you go back out there and it's content. It's a lot of fun, and you're fighting on both sides, depending on where you are on the map, and you can flag differently in that game. And it's a really good time. Usually you don't. Usually you rejoin the same team. But if you're penalized and you have the stat decreases, I'm not going to likely go back out there and join again, because the penalty, A, if I die, are going to start stacking and it's going to get out of hand, or else B, I'm not going to be as effective in combat. So that's kind of my concerns with there. If you want to motivate and encourage people to do PvP content, you got to let them actually engage with it without feeling like it's going to be, the risks are much higher than the rewards. So allow them to feel like they can engage with it and have fun with it. And even if they die, no big deal. You just die, you respawn at camp. Yeah, it costs you a little time and effort from a material standpoint to repair your gear, but that's it. Now you can go back out there and do it again. And if you die again, no big deal. You have to go through, gather a little bit of stuff, repair your gear, and you're on your way. Usually it's just going to be like a time thing. But if they put all this other stuff on there, man, oh man, you're not going to want to go out and do any more combat. And then if a second group wants to engage with you in PvP content and you have all these dampenings, it just further disincentivizes you from wanting to engage. Like, hell, I didn't like it to begin with. Now I'm dampened and I'm even less effective in combat. Man, can you just leave me alone? I'm just trying to give it my freehold. There's going to be instances like that come around, and I think they need to just drop all of the penalties on non-corrupted players. I would keep them from corrupted players. I think those are systems in place. You have a lot of players that want to kill others for their stuff. You keep that in the game. I think that's perfectly fine. A lot of players like myself will want to engage with that. It's fun to do the back and forth there. It's a really good time. But don't run off all the players that aren't into it. Even if you have to drag, you're not going to be able to drag players kicking and screaming into PvP, guys. They just don't want to do it. They're just not into it. They're They don't like attacking other players. They're friendly players. They don't role play that. They don't role play that way. And a lot of the, if you talk about the MMOs and Ashes, you'll hear a lot of talk about role playing. Well, a lot of players are pacifist guys. They're playing an MMO, but they might be a crafter or gatherer or just an adventurer or somebody that likes chatting and being social. They don't actually enjoy the combat. A lot of players, believe it or not, don't play MMOs for combat. So personally, I think combat is like 80% of MMOs for me. But there is a large social element of MMOs and all that other stuff where you want towns and cities and nodes and freeholds to be vibrant. You want players just to log in to be the bard and go to somebody's freehold and play music that they've created on their loot for an hour while other players are there just because they enjoy that. Like, I don't want to kill that guy like carrying the loot back to town just because I can. Like, say, hey, we've tipped the player because he's playing music and entertaining us. Now you don't want the guy to be like endlessly harassed and murdered and like chased away from the game, so to speak, for being a non-combatant. Like, hey, his weapon is he's just got this guitar, and say it's a non-combat guitar. It's just like playing music guitar, not for the bard class. And do we really want to run away like? The social fabric, like deterioration. Like if you're like, this is more of a real world kind of philosophy, but there's like an element of community and social fabric that goes on like wherever you live in real life, and the same is going to be true for the actual creation environment. And if you want these nodes and freeholds to be an environment, like you have this tavern and it's on the way towards a dungeon, and you want this to be like a vibrant part of the context of that server and that node area region, and players to gather there on a Friday night or after work, and they're gathering up supplies, there's music, there's entertainment, there's people hanging out and just drinking and talking to their friends and whatnot. That's a fun environment to play in, and I don't think you want to grief people endlessly when they're doing the non-combat portions of the game that make the game feel alive and feel vibrant. You don't want to have cities where the only players that are walking around the nodes or the freeholds are NPCs. You want everyone to feel welcome. That way there's more people walking around than to engage with that are actual IRL players that feel like the game's welcoming, it's fun, and they're not always have to be in a very intense play style. And I think what this current player death and death penalty system does, guys, is it really engages the players to feel like they're going to be a high intensity environment all of the time. Anytime they're out in Vera, it's going to be high intensity. Unless they're on the freehold or in a node, it's going to be very, very high intensity. And I don't think that's what most MMOs are. I think most MMOs should be a mix where you have high intensity locations to where there's higher risk and you have to be on your guard and watch out. And then there needs to be very minimal or no risk locations and a lot of like very low risk locations. But to have everywhere outside of freeholds and nodes be very high risk, and you have to have like your eyelids pinned back to your forehead at all times. You can't take a restroom break. You can't talk to the family. You can't take a phone call because just there's that off chance somebody walks by and see you AFK and just nab you. I don't think that's the direction the game should be going from a personal taste standpoint. Albion has that. I come from that environment. If you're gathering, you have to get back to a hideout or the city, and it might take you an hour, but you have to run back to safety. Under no circumstances whatsoever can you hang out AFK, even in a group. You just can't do that. If you like have 5 other people and you're AFK, somebody's going to come through there and bomb you, kill you, and whether they get your stuff or not, if you're AFK, you have a very, very, very high chance of being killed off when you're anywhere outside. If you're in a PvP area, which is pretty much most of the content in the maps out there, you're going to get killed. It's just going to happen. It's almost guaranteed. And if that any inkling of that, even if it's like a 10% chance comes to Ashes of Creation, it's going to run a lot of people away because they're just not used to not being able to be distracted. Hey, I want to go make a Sammy. I'm hungry for a ham and cheese. I want to go get a drink of coffee. They want to walk away from the computer for a second and go do that and come back and have the characters still be there. But I think in this game, you guys, my main advice would be, unless this changes, you better log off. You better log off, or else, because just by the off chance that somebody kills you and makes you respawn a long ways away from where you were headed or where you were, there's just going to be an inconvenience factor to either time, loss of money, all the skill and stat dampening, having to go gather and do experience just to regain where you were. It's going to be an inconvenience, and it's going to be frustrating for sure. So what I would do is I would encourage everyone to log off currently when they're in the game and they are distracted, can't keep their eyes, or they're not ready for high intensity gameplay, because it's gonna be frustrating when somebody does, and it might only be 5 or 10% of the time where you go AFK or something happens, or you're not ready for combat, and somebody engages on you. But that's going to be part of this world until they change the disc dynamic. And so my preference would be, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I feel like I already have, but for that to be rethought and just to be independent of the green non-combatants and the purple combatants. I think it should be unique penalties for the corrupt. That's my thought process there. That's enough on that, guys. I think the corruption system overall is really good. I think the overall dynamics of it are really strong. I like it. I'm just not a fan of the death penalty system they currently have in place. But with that being said, guys, that's going to be the end of my video. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Sorry if I come across pretty strong on this. I just come from different games, different experience, and I'm trying to take the mindset of thinking of what could go wrong with this and what could be abused for all players, not for myself. I'm game for anything. I'll adjust, but I don't think you want to have players. You know what I said. I think you want to encourage players of all stripes to have a place in the game, even if they are not the best of the game. But you want to encourage as many players to at least play the game as possible for the most part. It might not be the ideal fit for everybody. Most of the content might not appeal to them or be up their alley. They might not partake in, but they shouldn't feel like it's a scorched earth, scorched Vera, and they should have places where they can go and feel safe and feel like they can engage with the world and not be in a murderous environment at all times. So, and that can't just be the nodes and the freehold. They have to be able to explore the world to a large regard and not feel like, hey, if they're just innocent passerby, it's going to be a problem, and people are looking to take what they have at all times, and especially if you're in remote areas where eyes aren't looking. And I think that's the main probably thing is if you're in groups, you're in very public places, likely players killing you off is going to be lower. But if you're out in the middle of the wild, you're by yourself, you AFK, or you're with a small group in the AFK, say, hey, let's go get a drink, let's all come back in 5, and then regroup, and we'll go do this fight. And you all come back, and you're all dead because you're AFK, and another small band came up on you and just auto-attacked you to death. That is going to be a new experience for a lot of people, and I don't know how they're going to take it. So anyways, that's enough on this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed some of the dialogue. Leave your comments below. Let me know what your thoughts are. And again, I'm very positive about the games. And before I go, guys, I forgot about listing some positive things I wanted to talk about. So some different things that I think can help reset on mobs. So being able to reset if you're on a boss or any kind of NPC or mob, AI controlled monster. A reset ability if you're a bard or a tank, I think would be amazing. I think it'd be an awesome thing to implement. Second one that I think Albion does really well, and I don't think Ashes has yet, but a very quick mount ability. So in Albion, you're able to have your mount spawned next to you at all times. You do one click, you left click or right click the mount, and you're up onto your mount, and you're running away as fast as possible. And I think that's really nice. And it's a nice feature to have for players that are worried about how do I make sure I can get away. Because if you're 3 players, there's always going to be a group of 5 players. If you're 5 players, there's always going to be a larger group of 10 players. They're out to kill you in these kind of games. So you need to be able to flee. You have to have an ability to get away and get get out of harm's way fast. Otherwise, everyone's gonna be playing as the best stealth tactic players, the biggest like mobility classes. You're not gonna want to be a sitting duck in a game like this. You're gonna want to play a very high mobility, high evasion, high durability, something that can withstand or have some ability to disengage, escape, flee, survive. That's going to be the kind of play style that's going to be for most, unless you are one of the PvPers. Then you can go a different direction. But if you're just a sitting duck, if anyone touches you, you're a dead class. That is not going to be a fun class to play in a game like this long term. I will guarantee you. I wouldn't suggest it unless you're in a very large guild group environment at all time. But what I would suggest is a mount system like in Albion, to where you can have your mount spawn next to you when you're out in the open, and then you can click them, mount up, and you can run away when you need to. I would suggest that. I think the mounting is pretty quick. I haven't seen it on a hotbar in the videos, but I have seen Steven mount up, and it looks like it's relatively quick. But I will say, if you're looking at some of these tank abilities, guys, when somebody runs up and they're hard CCing you, it looks like you are being chain CC'd and going to be killed before you can take any actions. So that doesn't look like fun for a player or smaller groups that are trying to do content and they're being set upon by PvPers. So I think you got to give PvE players abilities and methods to disengage and run away and escape when they're outnumbered, particularly. And I think that needs to be fast mounting. I think would be a very nice thing you could give players when they're outnumbered, have an unwinnable fight. You need to give them methods to get away. Whether that's invisibility potions they can equip and pop and then just go invisible and escape that way. Whether it's fast mounting so they can, one other thing I've seen in the game is they have mount choices, which I think is awesome. I don't want to go too far into that, but give them options to get on a very durable mount that can't be CC'd and they can escape that way. A quick mount, ways to disengage from mobs quickly without them chasing them and killing them while PvPers are ganking them. Those are the kind of things that are protection. So if all the stuff doesn't stay in the game, I think they need to implement other methods and mechanisms to counteract all of the griefing that's going to occur. So give PvE players in small groups a way to reliably defend themselves if they're paying attention. If they're AFK, they're going to die. That's just part of these games. But if they're there and they are alert, they are paying attention, they're communicating in Discord or any kind of group speak, they have to have some ability to contend with the onslaught they're going to face of a larger group going to set upon them to try to kill them. You have to give them a way to where they're just not a sitting duck and it's going to be free kills and a bad day for them. If it's just always a bad day for them, they're going to stop playing, guys, or they're going to stop going there. You have to give players ways to engage in the world and be able to defend themselves. And I think, again, that's one of the main challenges I see for mixing of PvE and PvP content is usually the PvE content has to be very challenging or else it's not fun. But then if you make it extremely challenging and very hard, PvP players, it makes it really, really easy for them to just do a full wipe on those PvE players. It's super simple for PvP players to just wipe other teams that are on a difficult boss. It's not going to be challenging in most MMO games. So I'm a little worried about that, or very worried about that, and trying to balance out those different mindsets. I think wiping a PvE team should be allowed, but I think if it's going to happen, let's not double down on how bad their day is. It's like, hey, you got fired from your job, and hey, your wife leaves you too, and hey, your kids don't love you anymore, and hey, your dog says you can't pet me anymore. I'm gonna go hang out with a neighbor. It's like that's what these probationary skill and dampening effects. I feel it's like, man, like everyone's leaving me. I'm by myself now. Like, I don't know. Is that really necessary? I think if you get fired from your job, or there's a cloud over your head for the whole day, I don't think you need 16 other methods of crab raining down on you. I think one or two is enough. So I think if I was going to say anything, again, pick one or two bad day effects. You want to give some of that dice for, hey, there's some risk and reward to the game, and here's those penalties, for the downfall of risk and dying. Okay, durability loss and some money and materials that you have to spend to repair. time loss, inconvenience of having to travel back to where you were, etc. Fine. But I don't think it needs to be a parade of negative effects that they're going for. And I am concerned that they're overdoing it from that regard. And I don't know what I think those effects make sense for corrupt players to disincentivize them from picking on lower level players and such. But I don't know why they're in place for free-to-play. I'm not free-to-play players, sorry. PvE players. Or players that are just non-combatants. I don't know what the justification would be that they need those in place. And at some point, you just say, hey, we're just going to make your life hell until you engage in PvP. And if this is just a PvP game, that's all there is, which it's not. Because, again, if you have crafting and an artisan trees and systems in this game as robust as they want to have with all the systems, you can't make their life hell. Because they're an integral part of the game. So they have to be a part of the fabric that supports and is the framework and one of the core pillars of the game. So I think you need to make players that are full-time of that scope, not quit the game and be incentivized to partake. And a lot of crafters will be PvP players. I'm not trying to say, everyone's of one stripe. There's a lot of different types of players out there that do blends of all different game modes, guys. But I'm watching different podcasts, and a lot of the different players that I'm seeing that are engaged and loving Ashley creation, they are concerned and they are worried from what I'm seeing about the non-instanced PvE environments. And I am concerned that this will definitely alienate pacifists. And usually that means, not always, there are a lot of female FPS gamers out there now. There's a ton of them, but more feminine type players. And I don't want to mean feminine in a derogatory way. I just mean feminine as a non-combatant for the most part. A lot of times they're more Gentile. That's probably a better word to say. Let me rephrase. A Gentile mindset towards things of just go along to get along. And hey, I'm not here to do harm to anyone. I'm just here to explore and engage in a fantasy landscape and really do the social thing. I think, again, you want those players to be part of the fabric and support the game, and unless they are left alone to a large regard and supported to do crafting and gathering and do those main things. If it's just a scorched earth environment where gatherers, like in Albion, gatherers are hunted endlessly. Gatherers is such a thankless profession out there, and large roving bands of PvPers love to just travel around and gank and kill every single gatherer they can find. It is a miserable experience. Like, you have to be watching full alert at all times in Albion, or else you will die, because gankers are coming out at all times to kill you. A lot of times they'll take off their guild flag and then rejoin the guild afterwards just to kill you, and you were in their same guild or alliance. It is just a murderous environment over there. And if any element of that, it comes again over to Ashes. I don't know if those players that are not up for that, you're not going to be able to negatively reinforce them to partake in PvP. They just don't want to. It's not what their gaming experience is for. They don't want to spend their time in game hunting and attacking and doing combat. They might not even equip a weapon, guys. So like, whether or not you penalize them more or less, they don't want to fight back. They're not equipped to fight back. They don't have the right gear to fight back. So I don't know. I don't know what you'd be trying to do. If they're just not into it, they're not into it. And it's just, at some point, it's just like an abusive parent beating somebody up, beating a little kid up. You got to let them grow and be the individual they want, and I think that means choice. And I don't think there needs to be systems that reinforce and take away that choice and agency in how people choose to play a very open-ended game that this is intended to be. So my suggestion would be give the players a choice. Don't penalize them for not choosing to participate in game modes that you enjoy. I enjoy PvP. A lot of people don't. They don't want to engage in it. that's fine. But let's not penalize them for having different taste. That'd be my end thought process there, guys. All right, I'll leave it at that. Hope you guys have a great weekend. My name's Lorik Will, and again, leave your comments and any kind of discussion points that you might have that agrees or disagree, or have. I definitely encourage everyone to have a dialogue on any of the subjects that I post about. And thanks for your time. See ya.